Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to first thank CMG Events for organizing this public procurement seminar. It is always extremely well organized and it is extremely well attended, so I'm absolutely delighted to see you here. The arrangement that I have with Sarah is that she will pick a hot topic to discuss on and I have to speak on that topic. She's very bossy. I have no entitlement here at all to change the topic. It's the topic that I'm given and that's the one I have to talk on. The topics are carefully chosen. They are always very relevant. There always is an underlying issues with contracting authorities. That is why, ladies and gentlemen, I was really astonished that I was asked to talk today in March 2021 on the Electronic Invoicing Directive 2014/55. Is this not really old stuff? Is this not something that we should all know already about? After all, the European standard was published in the OJ notice on 27th of May 2017. We also know that Ireland did eventually implement this directive on the 12th of June 2019. We also know that all the deadlines to comply with these directives are over, because the last one was the 18th of April 2020. We also know that the OGP have selected a single framework contractor to deal with access point to the network. And that company is called Celtrino. So why, ladies and gentlemen, am I asked to talk to you in 2021 about the Electronic Invoicing Directive? Is this still a hot topic? Well, yes, it is. And you will see through my discussion, it is still a hot topic. So Sarah was not mistaken, and I thank her for having the opportunity to talk to you about it. Europe, and we have to see Europe, how Europe evolves. Europe is actually, as we all know, moves very, very slowly, but slow and steady wins the race, and that's how Europe works. In this case, Europe has been pushing contracting authorities to receive and process electronic invoices, because the idea is this would remove market barriers. It would remove obstacles to trade within Europe. It would remove administrative burden. It would remove errors. It would also avoid delayed payment. Europe wants to make sure that we are all paid on time, or at least that the economic operators are paid on time. Cash is king, so they want to avoid delayed payments. And it is good for the environment. Less paper, so it is good for the environment. To achieve that, the European Commission knew they had to do something. And what did they have to do? Well, they had to create a norm, a standard that would be simple, transparent, efficient. It had to be a simple, transparent and efficient process for electronic invoicing in Europe. Europe went to the European standardization organizations to create this norm. And they did, as I said, it was published on the 17th of May 2017. Did Europe establish such a successful norm that solved the interoperability between the various member states in Europe? Absolutely yes. And her name is PEPPOL. PEPPOL stands for Pan-European Public Procurement Online, and I will refer to it as PEPPOL. PEPPOL is a fantastic standard that was created by Europe, so good that non-Europeans want to use it. Non-Europeans want to become members of the PEPPOL family. We have Singapore, we have Australia, we have New Zealand, recently Canada, we have Norway. All of those non-European want to use PEPPOL. She is fantastic. Is Ireland a PEPPOL authority? Yes, Ireland is a PEPPOL authority, but Ireland is not dancing very strongly with PEPPOL. PEPPOL is there, but PEPPOL is not cherished in Ireland. And yet, what is happening in the UK? In the UK, they are dancing and whining with PEPPOL. They love PEPPOL. They know PEPPOL is the future. Ireland, no. Now, if we want to continue with the UK, which, as you know, at this stage is out of Europe, we will have to be able to communicate with electronic invoicing. Okay, so the electronic invoicing will be important. So it is time that we wake up and start understanding how it works. The message from me: wake up and smell the coffee. The good news for you is it's very, very easy to be compliant. Very, very easy, and it is not expensive. All you have to do is one phone call to Ken Halpin, who is the CEO of Celtrino. Very nice man, rings you very quickly back, and he sets you up in no time, and it is not expensive. However, the one thing you have to remember with this system, it's like driving a nice car. Once you drive it, you don't want anything else. In fact, you want better and better. And that is what Europe wants to do. That is what Europe wants to achieve. They want people to start using this electronic standard because they know that once you use it, you want more. Okay? At this juncture, the importance for Europe is the uptake has to happen. People have to use electronic invoicing, and they don't want anything more. As I told you, Europe moves slowly, but they get there. They created PEPPOL, a fantastic instrument that consists out of 4 pillars. First, we have a semantic invoice data model. Then we have the common syntax mapping methodology. We then have a method of the transmission, and like for all good things, you have to have terms and conditions that govern all that, and that's the Transport Infrastructure Agreements, the TIA. But let us go to the semantic invoice data model. When we humans talk, we might not always be very precise. I know lawyers are considered as semantic specialists and very often are considered as being the semantic annoying people because we try to find words or giving a meaning to a word that you might not have seen. That's the semantic. We can do that. We can fill the gap. But when you're dealing with a computer, you cannot do that. The computer doesn't allow or it doesn't have that flexibility of understanding what was said. It has to be crystal clear. So the very first thing Europe had to do with electronic invoicing was to understand what is the information you would normally see in an invoice. And they created a list. The list is in the directive. And all the member states had an opportunity to have a discussion as to whether they thought certain terms had to be or did not have to be in an invoice. And that was then settled. We now have what they call the core elements of an invoice. Once we have done that, don't forget we're dealing with computers, we have to be precise and we have to define what each and every of those core elements mean. And that is done through a norm, and that norm is called the European Norm 16931. All of that is put into the model. The model that we have described as a semantic model because it explains those terms. Pillar number 2 is a common syntax mapping methodology. Why? Well, all that information is in your model, but you now have to be able to bring all that information together and hope that you have you can bring a syntactic structure in your method, because what is important is that the computer must know where to get what information from. All that is done through the syntax. We don't impose in PEPPOL. There's no imposition of any format. You can use whatever format you want, but they use two standard international XML messages. The method of transmission has to be open. The Commission is very, very clear in the directive. It has to be an open transmission system, not a closed one. It has to be open to everybody, so that the technology, it has to be technology neutral, that anybody can access to it and there is no distortion of competition. It must be good for the contracting authority, but the Commission also said it must also be good for the economic providers, for the suppliers, the contractors that are dealing with it. And what we see in practice is that for the moment, it is actually pushed by the suppliers, pushed by the contractors rather than the contracting authorities. Why? Because they know that once it works, they will be paid quicker. It must, says the directive, also allow for a system that the contracting authority can check that the person that is coming in with an invoice is indeed the person that is entitled to be paid, that there is no issue about not being paid, that the underlying business transaction is there, and it is important that the person that has to authorize that invoice can do so. So all of that had to be in the report. The system they choose is what they call the four corners model. Four corners, as you can see here behind me. So effectively the four corners are the following. You have the supplier that talks to his the supplier that talks to his computer, the computer that then is linked through an internet basis with another computer based somewhere else, whom belongs to a contracting authority. And that information needs to talk. So you have the four corners. You might say this is all very complicated. After all, isn't this a public procurement seminar? And you're right. But that's what the directive tells us. So when you read the directive, it's all about interoperability. It's all about computers talking. But you do it every day. Every day when you go to an ATM machine, you flip in your cards, you are recognized as Mr. or Mrs. such and such. You then talk to a processor that could be somewhere else, in another country. They need to talk. There has to be an agreement. Then it has to be very clear what you want to do. Do you want to see how much money is on your account? That's one instruction. Do you want to transfer money to someone else? That's another instruction. And if you just are in a different country where they don't have the euro and you want to pay with dollars, for example, you need to be able to exchange at the exchange rate. Now, this is all looks very easy and seamless, but what it is, it's really an orchestration of many institutions working together with a common standard, a common protocol that is governed through general terms and conditions, and that allows you to interoperate between the two systems. That is PEPPOL. That is what PEPPOL is. So it's technical specifications that will allow you to send each other invoices. The suppliers are free to use whichever access point they want to have, because in order to deal with PEPPOL, in order to be able to serve on this PEPPOL network, you have to have an access point. We can choose whomever we want, the suppliers, but you, as a contractor, as a contracting authority in Ireland, you have to use, and there's nothing wrong with them because I find them very good, you have to use Celtrino. Celtrino were selected by the OGP to do precisely that, to put you on the system. They'll give you a PEPPOL ID number and they allow you to receive and process electronic invoices. Okay, you know all this now, so you'll say that's all fine. That was the technical part behind us, which is effectively 95% of what the directive is about. What is my duty? Is what you're screaming at me at this stage. What do I have to do as a contracting authority? Well, very little. Very little, that's the good news. The contracting authority when the contracting authority receives an electronic invoice within the definition of the directive, must be able to process that invoice if it is an electronic invoice as per the norm that I've explained to you, and if we're dealing with a contract that was the subject of a competition under the Utilities Directive, the Classic Directive, the Concession Directive, or the Defence Directive, either or. So we're talking above the EU thresholds. As you know, sub-thresholds competitions, they do not fall under this obligation. Okay, so it's quite important to know. The other aspect to know is we have to deal with electronic invoices. So if someone sends you a PDF, that's not an electronic invoice as per the directive. So you could ignore that if you wanted to. The contracting authorities can impose, if they want, that all the people they tender with have to use the electronic invoice. Not too many have done that in Ireland because yet not too many have used the access point in Ireland. So, but it is perfectly possible that in the future the obligation will be, if you want to work with me, contracting authority, I will impose you to send your invoices to me electronically, within the meaning of the directive. So that can come, and in fact will come. We can see that in Norway, this is already the situation. Why? Because people are further than in Ireland on it. They are not simply stopping at the receiving and processing. Now again, processing, don't panic too much about this. Most people that have done it, they get the document in, they are through the access point on the PEPPOL network, so they can receive it, but then what they do, and it defeats all the purpose, but for the moment you're compliant, they ask it to be transferred into a PDF. So an electronic document comes in on your system and you transfer it as a PDF, and then it's business as usual. You print it, you stamp it, you go through the control system, and then eventually, hopefully, you pay the poor person that is waiting for his payment. You're compliant. But what people, contracting authorities that I've talked to that are using this system, that have done this first step, they are all telling me, to really maximize the whole thing, it is much better that once the information comes in, it is directly linked to the accounting pack that is unique to this contracting authority, so that nobody has to retype that information over. If there is an error with the invoice, for example, the purchase order hasn't been named, well then it's automatically sent back to the original sender, who then says what is the purchase order, or if certain information is missed, then it's sent back, but you get it back within an hour. Good standard is that once an invoice is sent and it's automated, you should be paid within an hour. Now you can see how the ramifications of all this, how quick someone could be paid. That cash is king. So you want the money, it's a good thing to have. The aspect of being paid rapidly can be dealt with, but that requires you to fully automate. We're not at that stage. You're not obliged to do that yet, but it is an obligation that will come. Ladies and gentlemen, that really is all. Don't worry if you are not compliant. Do go to Celtrino. They are the ones selected by the OGP for you. As a contracting authority, as I say, they do their job well. Get your access points. Very quickly, you will realize how important it is to go forward, because you will become more efficient. You will be better for the environment. You will pay people quicker, and that will be very important for small and medium enterprises. And you will reduce your costs. No stamps anymore, no printing. Okay? So ask yourself this question. Would you go to a bank that doesn't allow you the facility to go to an ATM machine? Now, ask yourself the question, should you use the electronic invoicing system that has been very well developed and is very well and good for you, cheap and easily accessible? I leave you with that question. Thank you.